everybody. Welcome back to this week's edition of NB Poli Pod. My name's Joanna Killen. I'm here on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Pescatoma, Kadi, and Wolastoqey people. Welcome to the show. Hello, Brent.
Yo, what's good in the hood, everyone? How's everybody doing this week? I am excited about today's pod.
Yeah, we got a little educational component for you today.
We got some education. We've got some cursed response. So for those of you who remember last week, we had a chance to kind of call to action a more visible, seasoned political panel in this country, the Curse of Politics. And you know what? We did it, everyone. They spent 14 minutes.
Yes.
14 minutes analyzing the New Brunswick election, and we are going to play that for you.
Yeah, they didn't mention Brent or myself, but that's okay. We're pretty happy that they focused in on us for a hot minute. We will forgive them for calling St. John's. Classic Upper Canadian mistake.
Upper Canadians, man. Upper Canadians.
Yes.
They just are insufferable. But for those of you who live here now, we welcome you.
Yes, we do welcome you. Thank you for getting us to 850,000 people. And we also have my lovely father, Carl Killen, back on the show. He is a returning officer, apolitical, explaining a lot of the details around what Elections NB does and all the ways you can vote, which is awesome because there are many, and you don't have to just wait till voting day, which is very cool. So we'll leave him to explain that. We had our first coffee chat after dinner at his house, just hanging out. So I'm excited to have a little bit of teaching on Elections NB this week as well.
Yeah, so for those of you who are watching, you get to watch us with the camera, literal cell phone video set up in Carl's dining room, having a say, as they say. Sitting to say over there in West St. John. And it was great. And it was good to talk about some of the, even we learned something for sure about elections and what goes on with that. And this is not Carl's first rodeo as a returning officer. But shout out to all the men and women and volunteers and returning officers and, admin and the Elections NB staff who make our system work and we have one of the most advanced election systems in the country.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that, and for good reason, right? Because we're not supposed to know what makes it secure and safe, because the more we know, the more people can manipulate, and we have an amazing system here. And
we're so lucky. Didn't realize how lucky we are that we have such a robust process-oriented group behind the scenes who make sure that our elections are very much true to what they say they are. So it's a fascinating chat.
Yeah, so we are going to break for that first. And when we come back after our fireside chat with Carl, we're going to move into a response to the Curse of Politics political panel. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll have to play that clip. So we will play that clip for you all as well. So this week it's a bit of a we would normally say hodgepodge. So really, mishmash. It's a focus on two things: Elections NB and this response about the New Brunswick's coverage. Because, our point last week was this election matters.
Yes.
So let's flip it over to Carl. Let's hear what he has to say about that process, and we will be right back. Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are here for our first coffee fireside chat that we've ever done. So apologies if the audio is a bit sparse.
Different, maybe?
It should be pretty good.
Yeah.
And the reason we wanted to do this, we've had, if you haven't heard our podcast with Carl from the past, that was one of the first podcasts that we did last year. You can go back, check it out. It's a great chat with Carl when he was an MLA, just observations from that time and since. But we're here to talk to Carl about a different issue.
Yes, this is, he is not political at all. He is now a returning officer for Elections New Brunswick. So we're going to learn, it's a little bit of as a former teacher, I think that it's a great chance for you to help educate the public on the process of elections, returning officers, people who work inside of the election. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And it's important, right? Because St. John Harbor, where you're a returning officer, has historically low voter turnout.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
But it's also an issue for us with a lot of people checking out of politics and believing that, it doesn't matter, and or not knowing, so then not showing up. So we thought we'd do some pre-election campaign season conversations about that. So why don't we start off with just like where are the boundaries of engagement that a returning officer has to make? Because you would be a returning officer for a specific location.
That's correct, yeah.
And then, what would your interaction look like with Elections New Brunswick, Elections Canada, or, other returning officers? How's it? Yeah.
My connection is exclusively with Elections NB. Elections NB and whatever Canada's election machine is called, there is no connection. Elections NB is a standalone company, corporation, organization of government, if you will, that sits independently and exists exclusively to conduct municipal and provincial elections as necessary, as required by law, and on occasion by-elections. I think probably if there are any kind of plebiscite questions or anything like that, referendum, whatever, I think they would be within the bailiwick of Elections NB as well.
So when we come up to this election season, well, I guess
Which is actually happening this time.
We've talked about it on our podcast, the big election scare of the fall of 23. But yeah, what is it that you need to get done before an election actually happens? And
when you say before an election happens, do you mean before the actual election day itself?
Yeah, so we know when the quote-unquote writ drops.
When the writ is dropped and all that, yeah.
And when the writ is dropped, do you have an office?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's one of those things that comes beforehand.
Yeah, oh no. The nice thing about the situation that we have now, of course, is we have established election dates.
Yes.
And even though the mechanism exists whereby the Premier can choose another date, as we saw in the fall, Election NB's response is the same regardless. An election is called. It is up to Elections NB to organize returning offices throughout the 49 electoral districts within the province and ensure that from that first day that the office is open, that if someone from quite literally anywhere in the province wants to come in and vote for the candidate of their choice in the riding where they are eligible for voting, that they have that opportunity.
Wow.
So there's 49 of you.
There are 49 returning officers.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I happen to be, let's say October 10th rolls around, which is, a few weeks before our official election
What
date.
is the official election date?
I believe it's the 21st, October 21st or 22nd.
So if I happen to be in Miramichi, you're saying I could technically vote for my candidates back here in St. John Harbor where I'm at.
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's probably news to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize that you can vote anywhere in the province at any time.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. It is Election NB is dedicated to the idea that any and all eligible voters within the province of New Brunswick, regardless of where they are on any given day, should have the opportunity to vote.
And I think that was the other one we talked about before we jumped on here, was that you can start voting as soon as that writ is dropped. Right.
First day the first day that the returning office is open to the public, people should be able to come in and vote.
Which is interesting because technically the final date for candidates to be on the ballot happens later.
Absolutely.
So you could be voting
for whoever
first out of the gate candidates happen to be before you see a full ballot of who's
Absolutely.
there, right?
Yeah. You can, I mean, again, it's a write-in ballot until such time as as nominations are closed. Mm-hmm. The list of official candidates goes off to the printer, the ballots are printed, they come back.
Yeah.
At the point where each returning office has received the ballots that are required, then people can obviously fill out the actual ballot sheet. But before that, it's a little piece of paper that has a block in it or whatever. It's a black, this is in the past, I'm not sure, I haven't seen what they're doing this time, maybe it's different. But in the past, it's been just a little, sort of about yay big rectangle that has a white space where you can write in a name. Hopefully, whoever you choose to write in there is someone who actually
is going to be a candidate.
Is going to be a candidate,
right?
And
makes sense.
And is the proper candidate for the returning office or for the riding where you are eligible as a voter.
Right.
So you would, if it was someone, say, from somewhere else and they were voting for their candidate back in Miramichi, to use your example, would they have to provide you which riding you're from as well?
We have the capacity, we have a database that allows us to identify where people are eligible to vote.
So there's some technology in the background.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's very much driven, in fact, by ensuring that we have a very accurate and updated voters list.
So one of the things that's fun to think about with election, we just saw a president down in the U.S. deny the results of an election. What are some of the differences? I mean, not that we're intimately aware of what the elections process looks like in Maine or New Hampshire or wherever, but we all kind of heard that, and it kind of sent a shock through some of us, through me especially, because you kind of think of the democratic process as the sacred cow that we're all sort of even though we hate maybe the politics of another person, we all sort of are well, whatever the results are, they're the way they are, and we know about the weird election with Bush and Gore and some of the weirdness that went on there, sure, but for the most part, nobody lost their entire faith in the process. But now there is an entire cohort of people down there. I think it influences our politics here about trust in the process. But what are some of the safeguards we have in place to ensure that an election is can't be perfect, that it is secure, to the T and secure. Yeah.
I can only say that you'd have to take my word for it.
Right.
That the kind of scrutiny that is undertaken in terms of identifying a voter, identifying where that voter is eligible to vote, providing absolute, undeniable proof that they have voted and they are stricken off the voters list. It's really difficult, quite frankly, for me, to imagine a scenario whereby someone could rig the system, as it were. It's and so much of it is grounded in the integrity of the people who work at this.
It's quite a big team.
Well,
There's
quite a big team in terms of the people who act as returning officers, as election clerks, and then people working within individual returning offices. There's lots of them. The actual full-time permanent staff at Elections NB isn't really that large.
Right.
But they are dedicated. And I mean dedicated. They have an immense amount of pride in what they do. They are determined. As I say, if there's one thing that is the wish, the hope, if you will, of everyone at Elections NB, it is that everyone who has a desire to vote is given the opportunity. And we will go, all of us together in this, will go to whatever length is necessary to ensure that people get to exercise what is their right. Because it's, again, there's no question that the times we live in we see a lot of skepticism, a lot of people getting tied up in knots over concerns over this, that, and the other thing. But through my experiences with Elections NB, you will not find a more dedicated crew of people. You will not see a more secure, determined application of technologies, of everything that is necessary to find out who is eligible to vote, make sure that they have notification that they are eligible to vote, and that they know that no matter where they are in the hours that returning offices are open, if I'm from St. John and I, for whatever reason, I'm stuck in Campbellton, as long as I can get to a returning office in Campbellton, I can vote.
Right.
And I think it's really important that people know that they have this wide berth of opportunity, because often I think that they really just think, if I miss election day, that's it.
Or if I miss the advance polls, that's it. Like,
well, that's also why a good part of what Elections NB is about is information, is trying to spread the gospel, spread the word, as it were, that elections in New Brunswick are accessible. Returning offices in particular, but also all of our polling stations. We aim for 100% accessibility, right, for anyone with a disability. And with a disability, I mean, there are those who are struggling with mobility, perhaps. So you want to make sure that it's accessible.
But also sight and things.
Sight, hearing. We have little machines that will allow people who can't see to. We have Braille that we can do. We have people with hearing issues that there's just. People who have issues that challenge them physically, just in terms of even whether or not they have physical mobility. Right. They can still find a way to vote.
And there's always special ballots too, which are used. And how do they work?
Depending on the circumstance, if someone is through illness or through whatever is unable to actually appear at a voting booth or at a station or at the returning office or whatever, circumstances exist where special voting officers will make their way to people's homes and collect ballots that way. So I mean, there is no lack of effort on Election NB's part to ensure that A, everybody knows that there's an election, and B, that anyone who is eligible to vote is given the opportunity to do so.
That's a lot of work, and I know that on the day of you see a ton of people who you have to go find to work the actual polling stations at all the different booths. So there's a lot of recruitment involved with your job.
There is definitely recruitment. But again, it's and I as you've already noted, I've had my own time in politics and all that kind of stuff. But I find doing this in particular, it is a source of immense pride. And pride not just in being able to do it, but in being part of something that is the foundation, is the bedrock of this imperfect society that we all live in. We have elections. We have elected officials that we can be confident are there because we've chosen them. Right? And let's check out Venezuela. You probably can't say that with the same degree of confidence.
It's true. And I mean, for people who are interested, there's lots of opportunity for them, from what I've gathered, to help out.
Lots of room for people to apply, absolutely.
And would they find out that just through the Elections NB website?
Elections NB is a great place to start,
Yeah,
I don't know.
Thank you for giving us some insight, because I think that, this upcoming election is an important one, and every election is an important one. And I think we need to trust the process and the system in this way, because there is a lot of people who You're not political. Everyone involved isn't political. They're just trying to protect a process.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I think if we had one goal that we share in common with this pod, it would be to see
more people,
5%, 10% more New Brunswickers vote this year than they did last time.
Yeah. So remember, you can vote anytime once the writ drops.
You got multiple weeks, multiple locations,
lots of different ways. So
as they say, vote early and vote off. I mean,
thank you, Mr. Killen.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And we're back, everybody. Thank you so much for the chat. Mr. Killen, I called him there at the end. He was actually my high school teacher as well. He followed me to St. Malachy's.
Gosh, you had a rough old go, eh?
He was a great teacher, actually. He taught English, theater arts, journalism. The man's, been teaching for a long time, so it felt just like old times. Another little teaching with the old dad. So,
well, I wish we would have recorded it all, because we certainly had a staggering conversation with Carl leading up to before dinner. We covered everything from astrophysics. We covered Dietrich Bonhoeffer. We covered the Pope Pius XII, the Nazi Pope. We covered
the man loves to read, if you couldn't tell.
Dune. We were talking about Dune for a little while, and myth and story. Oh my gosh, we had a staggering conversation.
Yes, Carl is very well read, loves to read, and always fun to talk to. And he really cares about this process, as he should. And so, like, man of integrity. Of course, I'm biased, but I really do know.
We're lucky to have people like that in this process.
It's true, and I think that we see a lot of, like you kind of mentioned it in our chat, that we do see a lot of distrust of the process, and the fact that New Brunswick has such a comprehensive hold on it is pretty impressive, honestly. And I hope that, I was saying to you after, I'm like, I hope Sean Rose picks up on this and says and fully advertises how everyone should be hitting up their returning office if they're going to be anywhere different on election day or can't make time to vote, because really there is no excuse for that in this election at all. There is plenty of chances, as Carl described.
And we didn't even talk about write-in ballots.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about write-in. Like, we talked a little bit about the special ballots.
Yeah, but I mean, you can, that first week, you can order a mail-in ballot, and she's at your house, and it's out the door, and you haven't even got to worry about it.
That's right. So I love that quote of his around, like, Elections NB wants to make sure you are able to fulfill your right to vote. Mm-hmm. And this election should have the best turnout, just thanks to NB Polypod's promotion of the efforts of Elections NB. So we're super thrilled about that. And with that, let us move on.
So let's
to the national conversation. We're going to shift into being political. Yes.
Now we're going to be political.
Just us,
not
though.
Apolitical, be political. See what I did there? It's a bad pun. Hey. It's a terrible joke. But I made it. Anyway. Yeah. So, okay, Curse of Politics panel. The rest of this is going to be just a little debrief on how we talked about elections, New Brunswick, or about the election coming up in New Brunswick. Why don't you hit first? Sorry for that, folks. A little hiccup there. But yeah, let's take a listen to their take. Again, we got David Hurley, we got Jordan Likeness. Jordan Likeness is she's a Policy Institute advisor / been campaign manager for multiple she's the NDP girl, that's what we call her, but she's very qualified. Corey Tonight as well he's still working for Doug Ford as a conservative consultant, but he's also a commentator, a writer.
Conservative boy.
Yeah, Scott Reed and David Hurley. Scott's a speech writer, actually used to write speeches for Paul Martin. Worked for Chrétien. Him and David Hurley tried to help Kathleen win. Kathleen didn't win her second term under them, but and David Hurley's a pollster, so they work at the Gandalf Group, I think is the name of their company.
So they have a hot take on NB, so it's kind of fun. It's a very meta to have a podcast within a podcast, and hopefully we don't get in trouble. But
I don't care at this point in time. Shout out to Air Quotes Media. You guys posted on YouTube for free. You we'll give you guys all the attention in the world we can. People should go listen to this podcast in its entirety. And we're back. So,
wow.
What? The bird is the word.
I don't think I like Corey tonight, honestly. I'm not a huge fan.
You know, of course you don't like Corey because he likes Steve Outhouse, and
I don't understand.
You've been trying to goad Steve Outhouse, the the ghost of Ottawa, who's like puppeteering Blaine Higgs. And swear to Christ, he's out there just like with what do they call those guys who are? What do they call them? Not puppeteers.
Yeah, puppeteers. Like the marionettes are the
marionettes.
ones
Thank
that
you.
are.
Yeah, that's right. The marionettes are the ones that are out there. Anyway, it's and you saw it today. You saw it recently this week. The Conservatives putting out the first round of attack ads we've seen on Susan Holt. But before we get into any of that, what did you hear in that kind of take from the curse panel that stuck out?
Well, I just think that they just in general have and they admit it to this, not a really great understanding of the province. We're not ones to know, I guess. But, I do feel like David Hurley tried to pinpoint and point out that it is complex, that there are issues, French and English, rural, urban. I think that's what he meant when he was saying like St. John's versus everyone else. That there are a lot of complexities to the province and that it's not just a simple analysis that can be really done in a short amount of time. But I do think that they just blasted through it because they don't know a lot about us here. And it was interesting to hear like how Steve Outhouse is a stand-up guy and all this kind of stuff. And
the boys,
I don't know.
They always have each other's backs, right?
They do. They definitely do.
But yeah, they clearly did not listen to our podcast.
Clearly, which we will forgive.
I'm very disappointed. I don't know if I will forgive. I'm very disappointed because we did we blitzed them, we tagged them, we hit them up.
They retweeted us. I was very
and they retweeted us, so I thought, okay, at least they're gonna try. If they would have at least listened in, I think if they Spark Advocacy's got a great take on some of the interesting realities of this election. They're on Twitter. They did a little bit of a highlight reel of an election map. That's one thing I'd love to technologically achieve. So if anybody's listening to this pod, and I will say our NB Poli listeners are some of the best because every time we turn around, they're solving a problem. Last time, you'll remember, we were trying to figure out what's your beef? What show was that from? And we ran into a listener on a walk who said it was Street Sense. Well, this time, I would love for us to get a virtual map that we can put up on the screen. We can share it on here, just like I'll share a meme. I'll share in a minute. That we can point out the ridings.
Ooh.
Anyway, technological problem for me that I cannot solve. I certainly can hold up a riding map, but then it's not interactive and it's not.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can do something, I'm sure, but
maybe Atlas might have something like that. But
yeah. Anyway, I agree. It wasn't a deep take on things.
They don't like Higgs, that's for sure.
They do not like Higgs, which, well, David Hurley certainly made himself available on that. And I mean, I'm surprised that an upper Canadian knows about the core party, the Confederation of Regions stuff. I will give shout out to that because it's, it's a bit of an old hat. Blaine certainly was always criticized for being part of the core party. We have a podcast that talks just about that. You can go back and listen to it. It's episode from last year, sometime around now. Maybe it was in May. I can't remember, but it's called Core Blaine. Like Kurt Cobain, Blaine Higgs. So I will say this though, the idea of the Conservatives having good wedge game because Steve Outhouse is here dovetailed with Jordan Leichnitz's point that Steve Outhouse has a history of putting problematic leaders, Danielle Smith being one of them in Alberta that he dealt with, in the penalty box, if you were, in the sin bin, as we call it in rugby, right? Like, get him off the air. Don't let him be seen. Make as few announcements with your leader as possible. Just do the person-to-person stuff and not on, and run attack ads against the other team. And
don't talk to the media.
Don't talk to the media. Like, if
Mhm.
that's the game here, and there is a bit of a wedge game, what do you think are the odds that Blaine can rise again, if you will, from the depths of despair that the PCs find themselves in?
I don't know. I find they're grasping at straws right now with the issues that they're choosing, like St. John River, and Sean pointed out on Twitter that you can go look at Facebook analytics to see who they're targeting, and it's like people 65 and above. So they're going for, folks that don't really understand the Indigenous issues. And so a lot of folks are also pointing out that Higgs is trying to align with the Indigenous communities around shale gas, while at the same time goading them in talking about, do you want to rename the St. John River? It's like all these very superficial, vague, like, I don't even know if it's vaguely racist. I'd say it's outrightly racist undertones in asking the question the way that they are, as well as this latest one with and Liberal leader Susan Holt saying, Susan wants to close schools. Like, it just reminds me of that American style of politics where it's just like all of this like sinister.
Tim Scott wants to take your guns away.
Yeah,
Do you know that Tim Scott will remove your guns from your home personally? That kind of stuff.
1,000%. And like one of the things my dad and I actually used to do when we would drive home from Maine was listen to Rush Limbaugh in like the night episodes of Rush Limbaugh. And it's such a page from their book, and like repeating the same things over and over, and just trying to goad public that's kind of not paying that much attention and dragging them into these issues that don't matter at all. And they pointed this out. Yeah,
Keep going.
no, yeah, they that's what the gang at Curse was talking about, was just saying, like, while you're over here talking about the St. John River, Higgs is over here having terrible time with healthcare, and you're not, even though that's a really important issue to people over 65.
Yeah, I do think Steve Outhouse will have to be some sort of magician if he can get Higgs to win, because the disadvantages to a campaign run with no incumbents. Like, they have no powerful incumbents left in their party. Now, this is New Brunswick. I know that we don't often get incumbent cabinet ministers touring with the premier and doing all this stuff, but anywhere Blaine Higgs goes in this province where he had a safe seat has lost its incumbent leader, except maybe a few that are left. But very few. I mean, Andrea Mason was one of those original rebels, but to the point of losing incumbents. Shout out to Blowing It Pod, because Blowing It Pod is another podcast in New Brunswick on various issues. But they have mean meme game.
They do.
And so here's a meme from them, which I just thought was hilarious. So I'm going to put it up here. So for those of you on the podcast that are listening, this is a picture of David Kuhn with the eclipse glasses on, smiling, big old smile, looking at the sun, being eclipsed. But the caption reads, "Watching another PC and like progressive conservative ML resign. 11 down, 17 to go." So meme of the week goes to the Blowing It Pod, political meme of the week. That was great.
We love them. They do a lot of analysis as well. So if you ever have a chance, definitely check them out. And yes, excellent meme game from Mary. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your name. From the co-host there. But amazing work.
Yeah, and I just think, Scott Reed kind of stumbled into it at the end there. Makes a great point, though. All that we have to do here, and I mean, David Hurley certainly said there is a share of vote that the Greens have. Jordan makes the point, and I agree with this, that there is there is a share of Green here, but there is an unknown leader in Susan. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem when you've got somebody who's unpopular and bleeding incumbents like Higgs is. And so, I think the analysis has to go a little bit deeper here. And I think this is where, like, they say Canada 338 right at the top still gives the PCs a 5-point lead in the polls. Well, they do, but we've talked on this podcast at length many times before, and we'll say it again quickly here as we wrap up, because we are getting close to an hour. We only have trailing indicators on PC support
Yeah.
When push comes to shove and they got to put their check mark beside somebody, and they've encountered all of the issues that they've had over the past 6 years, mostly 3 years, let's say. What is it that Blaine has put in the window that would cause an unknown PC candidate in a community like St. John Harbor, like St. John North, like Fredericton North, like, you know, a Madawaska? I don't know why Corey thinks all of a sudden Madawaska and Edmonton are going to be competitive for the Conservatives. It's insanity. But why would anybody put their check mark beside an unknown PC MLA? You know, when the last guy they probably voted for stepped down because they were frustrated with the party and the way he managed caucus. So it is a completely different situation out here than what Steve Outhouse would have had to face with Danielle Smith. And it doesn't take into consideration what I thought Spark Advocacy did a good job at pointing out. You know, when they said, look, like the seeds that the Greens have been sowing for 10 years. I mean, that party's only been around since 2010, as you know.
Yeah.
But they seem to be maturing. And, you know, the strong slate of candidates out there, the Liberals fundraising is low. So are the Liberals going to be able to scare those people who are looking for an alternative into submission like Liberals always do? They always try to scare at the last minute. You know, don't vote for the NDP or don't vote for the Greens because then the Conservatives will get in and that'll ruin everything and that kind of stuff. I don't think they're going to have the money to make that petition to New Brunswickers.
Yeah, and they, you know, they pointed out the branding issues that the Liberals currently have with the brand nationally, with how well Polyev is doing here in New Brunswick. I do think voters here see the difference between Higgs and Polyev, despite all their efforts to try and align them. And I try to pay attention to the Facebook comments, I guess, and people are pretty upset with the Higgs adjuster tax and are starting to see where things that could have been done for them weren't done for them. There was really an interesting story this week, a really low pickup on the $300 Higgs bucks. So there's now 41 million of that just sitting there unused. Only 50,000 folks actually decided to go through the process, which indicates
I'll take someone's.
When he was touting that it would be 250,000 people that would be, you know, going for this penance. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with this government, multiple levels, and I don't think their little distraction techniques of the St. John River and Susan Holt quotes from 12 years ago are gonna trick anybody. So more of the same from our dear friend, the monorail salesman out of Ottawa.
Yeah, I know. Well, that is going to do it for us this week. It, you know, a lot of engagement from the Curse there and our own separate video on Elections NB. Hope you've enjoyed it. Shout out to our Patreon friends.
Yeah, we love you.
Jackson Jones, Mark Brewer, Sean Rouse, Luke Robertson, and Fred LaForge. As always, thank you for your support. If you want to support this podcast, we love you for it. Email us to find out, or just go to patreon.com/NBPolyPod. We will eventually be engaging through Patreon. Right now, we're busier than one-handed paper hangers, as I like to say. So we're just a little slow getting up on the engagement community there, but plan to be reaching out.
Yes,
And
it's